This podcast is brought to you by the North Dakota Petroleum Foundation. From heating our homes and powering our vehicles to cell phones, clothing, and medical equipment, oil and natural gas makes everyday life better. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities. Learn more at ndpetroleumfoundation.org. In addition to recording this podcast, I also write newspaper columns, and this Christmas season you can give the gift of news and get a special deal subscribing to the publications I publish in. That's the Fargo Forum, Grand Forks Herald, Jamestown Sun, one low price, you get them all. Gift the news, call Santa's hotline at 800-274-5445 and give an annual news subscription for 50% off this holiday season. It's the perfect gift to keep anyone on your list informed. Simply call 800-274-5445 to give the gift of news. Welcome to the Plain Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Port. In a moment, going to be interviewing Sean Cleary. He's a Republican, wants to run for the Senate seat in District 35, which was the incumbent in that seat is a Democrat by the name of Erin Oban. She announced that she's not running, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But first of all, thank you for everybody who's been tuning in and listening to the show. A lot of you are listening through the Chrome browser, which means that you're clicking the link and listening to the audio in like an article or maybe at sayanythingblog.com. And if you're listening that way, consider subscribing via one of your favorite podcasting platform. I don't know if it's Spotify or what are the other ones out there? TuneIn, I think, is one. There's a lot of them. There's all sorts of them. And this podcast is available on all of them, and sometimes it makes listening when you're on the go or maybe you're on the treadmill or something, makes it a lot easier. So consider subscribing that way. Also, if your podcasting platform of preference allows you to review the podcast, if you would leave an honest review, I would appreciate it. And if it's a positive review, hey, that's even better. All right, so now let's go to Sean Cleary. Now, Sean is a veteran. He's a young guy, but he's got pretty good resume. He's a former staff member for United States Senator John Hoeven, former staff member for Governor Doug Burgum. He currently works as a project manager for the National Information Solutions Cooperative. That's a technology company. They're focused on serving electrical cooperatives and broadband companies in rural America. And now he is running for not the United States Senate, the North Dakota Senate. Even better. Yep. Sean, how you doing?
Good, Rob. Thanks for having me on.
What made
it's been an exciting week.
Yeah, it has. What made you want to run for the legislature?
As I was spending some time thinking about it over the last couple weeks, months, really the word I always came back to was opportunity. I've been real thankful. I grew up in Bismarck here, moved home a couple of years ago, and I've been really fortunate to be able to find a job I like doing, live in a community that I love. And so when I think about serving in public office, I just want to make sure that sort of opportunity for people who want to get a good education here, find a good job here, those sorts of things are available for anybody who wants to do it.
It's an interesting that's an interesting seat. And that Senator Oban was really the only Democrat elected in Western North Dakota, to the extent that you could. Bismarck's pretty central, but to the extent that you could consider Bismarck, North Dakota is really the only Democrat. I think after that, it's District 9 up along the Canadian border. And then after that, all the rest of the Democrats in the legislature are elected in the eastern part of the state. So, Senator Oban had a reputation for being pretty moderate. How do you approach that? Like, how do you convince voters who elected her that you're a good replacement?
Yeah, I think Senator Oban's representation of the district, it reflected the politics of the district well. People in Bismarck here, it's a Republican town, conservative town, but especially in 35, I think folks believe in good government and in the community. And so I think candidates who take that seriously and communicate well and respond well to the needs of what folks are focused on in Bismarck do well here. So I think I think she did that well. I disagreed with her on some things, but I think she did a real good job of communicating and took the job legislating seriously. And, that's something I hope to do too.
Yeah. Was she your favorite teacher in school?
She was the math teacher, and I can't say that was my favorite subject, but she was a good teacher. I joke with her that I'm just glad she didn't hold all the dumb stuff I did as a 12-year-old against me.
Yeah, well, I do think you admitting that you didn't like math class is not so great when you're running to help write North Dakota's budgets, but we'll let you slide on that one a little bit.
Yeah,
I'm teasing you. I'm teasing you. I didn't like math class either.
Well, I went back to get a master's in economics, and it was pretty hard to avoid math at that point.
Okay,
so.
Well, fair enough. Fair enough. Sean just dunked my teasing right back in my face. What do you? I mean, we're coming into a pretty divided political environment in North Dakota right now, and I've written pretty extensively about it. I don't know if you agree or disagree with my, take on some of it, but I mean, the North Dakota Republican Party, a pretty divided party. I don't know if you agree with that or not. I see it as being pretty divided. Speak to some of that, because you're going to be joining a chamber that has some pretty sharply divided factions in it. I guess speak to some of that for me. Yeah,
for sure. Well, I started being politically active about when I went to college, started to pay more attention to what was going on. And that was back in 2010, Tea Party movement. And so, I guess folks have been telling me the Republican Party's fallen apart just about as long as I've been a part of the Republican Party. And, it's a big tent party. There's a lot of folks who feel really passionately about different issues. It's one of my things I like about being a Republican is we have different, you call them factions or caucuses or groups, there's people who have different interests, different desires and different views of how they view the party. But, I think at the end of the day, there is a lot of things that really unite Republicans together. But yeah, it definitely seems, especially at the national level, like, it is a little bit more intense than it seems like it should be. At the local level, I think it is a little bit better. There's activists, there's people who feel strongly about issues, but, I think that's important too. It'd be weird to me if there weren't people who were fired up about different issues, but, I think at the end of the day, just trying to come from a place of, mutual respect, good faith, that's an important perspective to bring to it.
Describe yourself, your philosophy a little bit. I mean, obviously you're a Republican. That tells us some things, but describe yourself. What's your philosophy about government?
Yeah, when I think of how I view issues and what I hope to get done in the legislature, I really view my politics as putting communities first. I'm a conservative guy, but I think that provides a good lens into how do we empower people to improve their lives, improve their families' lives, improve their communities around them. I think that's a really bottom-up thing, not a top-down thing. Good government's important, but I think a lot of my philosophy revolves around making sure that we're empowering folks to make good decisions and, have the opportunity for success.
I think that's really interesting. I mean, a lot of times we spend so much time trying to pigeonhole each other. You're a conservative, I'm a liberal, whatever. Chad Oban and I, who is actually the husband of Senator Oban, and he is a co-host of mine on this show sometimes. He and I were talking about this the other day, and we were talking about it. The child care issue in North Dakota is a very important issue, and which I agree with. I mean, it's hard for people to. I mean, as we all learned during the pandemic, it's hard to work when your kids are at home, right? And you need somebody to watch them. Like when our kids couldn't go to school, I mean, that was tough for a lot of families. And so, he's very passionate about the child care issue. I am too. And a lot of times it seems like, the conservative position is we've got to be against doing anything with child care. And I don't think that's true. I think there's things we could do. Like, I think a lot of maybe people on the left say, well, we got to spend all this, more money. We got to have credits or whatever, subsidize it or whatever they want to do. But I think there's also a conservative perspective for that, where we could ask, why is it so hard to start a childcare business? Why do so many of these businesses struggle? How hard is it for them to hire? Like, I know one thing that gets brought up, the background checks could take weeks to complete, which makes hiring very, very difficult. And by the way, hiring for a job that doesn't pay a lot to begin with. So, like that particular issue, I think it's really interesting that there is a, like conservatives can agree, this is a problem. We got to do something to fix the problem, but there are ways to fix it that maybe don't include growing government. Like that to me is the sort of conservatism we need.
Yeah, I agree 100%. When I think of things like childcare, real important. I'm a little biased on this one. My wife and I are expecting our first child in January. So, uh,
Congratulations.
yeah, thanks. We're just really excited to be parents. And, but, when I think of what's important to me, families are the building block of our communities. And so, what can we do to support families, support moms and dads and their kids? But yeah, to your point, we want to avoid issues that we see in sectors like, healthcare or higher education, where, sometimes putting more money into it isn't going to drive better outcomes. And, so I think it requires nuance. It requires hard work. But, when there's an agreement that, we need to have childcare solutions, we need to have affordable and effective healthcare and good educational opportunities. More money is not always the answer, but there's definitely, I think, agreement that those things matter for building our economy and improving our communities.
What do you think's the if you get elected to the state senate, what's the top issue the state's facing? I mean, what are you focused on as a policy area?
Yeah, I always get a kick out of it when politicians are always talking about, it's they're pro jobs, because that can mean so many different things. But that definitely to me is my focus. You hear Governor Burgum talk about it. You hear folks across the state talk about the workforce issue. And when I think of our state's economy or ability to grow, I think workforce has to be number one. And we're fortunate in District 35. We have Bismarck State College. They had a big announcement earlier this week. Plays a real critical role in developing workforce. It's not always a 4-year degree that's going to get it done, especially in a state like ours when you look at the kind of job opportunities available. So, I think of, how can we make sure that individuals who want to stay and work in the state have the option to find a good paying job. And then I also think it conversely, we have business owners, entrepreneurs who are trying to hire staff, build their companies. I want to make sure those sorts of folks have, access to the kind of, workers and talent they need to be able to grow and be successful at the national and, even the global level.
Do you feel, because obviously it's also kind of funny to hear politicians talking about jobs. It kind of seems like right now we have jobs. We're trying to get workers to get back to work. So, I mean, speak to that. And this is something we covered on the last show where, I mean, there's a generational, and I'm not trying to say it's necessarily even a bad thing. The expectations Americans have shift from generation to generation. So it seems like we're coming into a time where, there's a new generation of Americans that have some very different ideas about what works, what work should be, how work should fit into their lives, and things like that. How do, from a public policy perspective, how do we adjust to that so that our economy, somebody's got to work, right? Yep. So how does our economy work? How can we use public policy to sort of bridge that gap between these new expectations and the reality that our economy has certain needs?
Yeah, no, that's a great observation of kind of where we're at. Like you said, it seems like the number goes up every day, but we have tens of thousands of job openings in this state. I think the pandemic has been kind of a crash course in how people view work and what they want to do and what that means to them as far as providing for themselves and their families. I think a big part of it is making sure that, I think there has been changing expectations about what it means, what folks are trying to look to get out of work. But I think, in order to grow that, we just need to make sure we have the, have options available for folks. It doesn't look the same for everybody as far as, do we want to have both parents working, or do we want to have people going to college to find these jobs? People are complicated. They have different motivations for wanting to do different things. But, I think at the end of the day, making sure we have a state that has those options for people who want to pursue, their livelihood the way they want to do it, making sure that they have the options available to them, that they're not pigeonholed into certain things, or that they are limited in what's available to them, but making sure that they have that opportunity to choose what they want to do and make a good living doing it.
It seems to me like the the conservative approach, the philosophical approach, and I don't even know that it's exclusively conservative, but it seems like flexibility is the order of the day. Like we need to leave businesses flexible as possible, not lock them into old models of employer-employee relationships, not lock employees either into those old models. We need flexibility because, frankly, we have tools today that are amazing that allow people to work from home. Everything, right down to like urban planning is built around this idea that businesses needed to have workforces available within travel distance, right? So that you could commute in to the office, and now the office might be anywhere. Like everybody doesn't always need to be in this building. So, do you agree with, it seems like flexibility is what we need.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hinted at there a little bit too, but also, promoting innovation. The economy is changing rapidly. The pandemic accelerated a lot of those trends. And so making sure that we're well positioned to, harness that innovation and do it in a way that benefits not just workers, but people more broadly, consumers, taxpayers, when if it comes to government services, making sure we have an environment that promotes innovation. And, kind of going back to what I was talking about earlier, I think that process is bottom up. It's empowering people to make good decisions and to, build their careers, build their businesses. It's not necessarily something that comes, from the government down. And so making sure we have an environment that empowers people to thrive in that way, I think is just really important to me.
Let's talk about social issues for a moment. Our national headlines dominated by the Supreme Court taking up a case that could overturn Roe versus Wade. And if they do that, is going to punt that debate back to the states in a way that it hasn't been in a long, long time. Many states like North Dakota have in place trigger laws, as a matter of fact, that take effect if Roe should be overturned. And you could go broke trying to bet on what the court's going to do. So that'll be what it'll be. But tell us somewhat about your philosophy with abortion. It's an issue that's very important to a lot of voters. Where are you at on that? How would you describe yourself?
Yeah, Rob, like you, I don't try to predict the future when it comes to what the Supreme Court's doing, but we are at a pretty critical time when it comes to, the topic of abortion. Personally, I'm a pro-life guy. That's something that it's been a pretty big part of my life, big part of my faith throughout my entire life. And, so when I think of what might happen if Roe v. Wade's overturned, I think at the end of the day, regardless of, the different scenarios that might play out in the state here, we do need to make sure we're keeping the focus on what drives the pro-life movement in the first place. And that's that every life is worthy of dignity and respect. And so when we're talking about public policy solutions to that, we need to make sure that we're, empowering moms, empowering families, and supporting children. So, I don't know what that world will look like, if Roe v. Wade's overturned. And, I'm pro-life. I'm hoping that, we have the opportunity to, live in a society that values life. And I just want to make sure that we are taking a whole approach to that too.
I consider myself pro-life, but one thing I think that has changed for me over the years is I've grown very dubious about trying to ban it. I think most Americans don't want abortion to be a thing that happens, and I worry about laws that, because I look at what has happened with like alcohol prohibition or drug prohibition and the difficulty to try to stop people from doing something. And obviously those are different. I don't want to say abortion is something anybody wants to do, but something that people are just going to do anyway. Like they will seek it even though it's illegal. And when you ban it, you create black markets, and then those black markets empower some not very good people, and a lot of people get hurt. I don't want people to get hurt. I also don't want people to have abortions. So I don't know. To me, I'm really focused on what are the things we can do to support people to make good decisions, or to make safe and healthy decisions, so that we don't get to the point where somebody's feeling like they need an abortion. That's what I would like to do, is not block abortion so much as let's just diminish the need for them as much as possible. That's kind of my pro-life philosophy these days.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you just said, Rob. I think we need to support people as best we can. It's tricky. It's not, it's a situation that a lot of folks feel really strongly about on both sides. But, I think at the end of the day, keeping the focus on children, keeping a focus on families and mothers, I think we have the opportunity to move forward in a way that, respects life and respects that from when, whether it's children or vulnerable adults, it's something we have to keep a focus on throughout life. And so I just hope, whatever happens, don't have my crystal ball in front of me, but whatever we do going forward, that we can make sure we are always just putting that focus on the value of life.
Let's get back. You got a degree in economics, so let's talk about North Dakota's economy. One of the, and Governor, your old boss, Governor Burgum, talks about this. I've had conversations with him about it, where North Dakota's since statehood, and certainly from before, we've always been starved for capital. It's hard to get people to invest in North Dakota. And when I say invest, not just financially, it's hard. One of the reasons why our state consistently enjoys a low unemployment number, I would argue some of it is that we do pretty good managing our economy. But the other thing is, even when the bottom may fall out of it, like when we saw, oil prices crash and crop prices crash, and, we had some tough sledding for our state's economy not so long ago, our unemployment rates remained low. And a big reason for that is when people didn't have a job here, they left. Which is not such a great thing. I mean, it's, yes, our unemployment rate's low, but it's because people left instead of finding other opportunities. So that's not so good. How do we fix that? And we've been trying to do some things, and it's, we talk about how to solve these problems. It's generational problems. We never really we are doing some interesting things right now with, directing the legacy fund to some in-state investment. I think that's really exciting. But what's your approach to that? How do we get to a point where we can have the sort of opportunities in North Dakota that attract other people to come here and want to invest not just their money but their lives in our wonderful, wonderful state? How do we do that? How do we crack that egg?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good examples of folks who have done that successfully, throughout the state's history. Governor Burgum himself built, Great Plains Software. And showed that you could build a tech company in a place like North Dakota. Even I work for NISC, my current employer. We have members in all 50 states. And we're right here in Mandan. And so folks have done it. There's Aldebaran just sold for billions of dollars. And I think part of it is, I kind of have two big thoughts on that. Part of it is just making sure we have the environment that encourages investment, that we have, a regulatory and tax environment that businesses can succeed in, and that we have the workforce to do it. And so, it goes back to that kind of bottom-up approach. We need to set the stage for that sort of investment. But I do think there's a role in, the state's ability to invest in the state. You mentioned using the legacy fund to invest in the state. I think a lot of folks would agree that's a good idea. The legacy fund, there's been good ideas out there as it related to, tax relief too. I know Representative Hedlund's been pushing income tax relief using the legacy fund. I think that's a great idea. You talk about putting more money back in people's pockets, and in my opinion, that's nearly always going to be a great decision.
I think anything we can do to lower the cost, and our income taxes are pretty low to begin with, but
yeah,
anytime you can lower the cost of the financial burden of being a North Dakotan is a good thing, right? Yep.
And so, yeah, there's, especially with the inflation we've seen, some of the things we're talking about with childcare and healthcare, put more money in people's pockets, that empowers them to spend it how they need to spend it for themselves and their family. When it comes to the legacy fund, I think that's going to be a pretty critical issue. It's something that the state's positioned ourselves well to invest in and grow, and whether it's tax relief or providing different services. I think there's potential there for investing in the state, and want to make sure we get that right. And I know you've covered it, and a lot of other folks about some of the in-state investing, and I just think a big part of it is making sure that we keep moving forward and that we keep have an opportunity for, folks who need that capital to access it, whether it's private capital or assistance from some of these resources that, we've been so fortunate to have because of our oil and gas industry that's, put the money into this legacy fund in the first place.
Let's say you get elected November next year. You're going to then serve in the legislature beginning that January 2023. What's the first bill you introduce? Put you on the spot there. Now he's got to think about it.
Yeah, that's a tough one, but that's a good question. I think whatever bills I end up bringing in the first session, I think generally the first session, it would be a very humbling experience to be in the legislature, period. So I want to make sure I'm learning a lot from my colleagues and, other folks who have that institutional knowledge. But, I think it goes back to the priority on workforce, bringing bills that help expand North Dakota's ability to build its workforce and provide good paying jobs in the state. What that looks like, we'll be putting our heads down and working through that. But, I think that's going to be the big focus coming into the session.
Do you feel what can we do to change? Talking about workforce and everything else. I mean, the big challenge is sometimes getting people to come here, and a lot of that I think has to do with some unfortunate, perceptions about North Dakota, which is that. First of all, the weather, which is not really something we can do a lot about. It's an acquired taste. But even beyond that, I mean, I think sometimes I hear my Democratic friends talk that North Dakota is, I don't always agree with this, but, they talk about how North Dakota could seem like an unwelcoming place for refugees or for maybe people in the LGBTQ community. They talk about a lot of those things where, and again, a lot of this I think is unfair, where North Dakota is cast as, being a very parochial place or not a very enlightened place or anything like that. How do we combat some of those things? Because I think that is very central to, combating those perceptions, whether it's the weather, whether it's the idea that our communities are boring and there's nothing to do, or that we're unwelcoming or what have you. How do we combat those things? Because it seems to me like we're not going to be able to address the workforce needs unless we address that.
Yeah, I think I want to touch on the first point you made there before move on to the second. I think there's things that are always going to be important for families. Having safe communities, having good schools to send their kids to, and then, to go back to, having a good job to work at. Those are kind of the bread and butter issues, those kitchen table issues that folks are always talking about. And I think those are important to, people aren't going to move here if those aren't available. But, more broadly, you talk about maybe some of these social issues or some of the other, perceptions of the state. Frankly, I disagree with a lot of that. I think, North Dakota, I'm biased. It's my home state, my hometown. I love talking to my friends who aren't from here about all the great things we have going on.
And I just want to interject. I'm not listing all those things because I think that they're true. I'm listing those things because, let's face it, in politics and everything else, there's reality and then there's the perception of reality. And sometimes it's a practical matter for policy or politics. Perception is reality. So those perceptions exist, whether you and I agree with them or not. And I'm with you. I largely don't agree with them because I actually live here. But people who don't perceive it that way. So how do we fight it? And not necessarily to focus on the social issues. And this is not exactly a new thing either. I mean, what is it? Eric Severide, the famous broadcaster from southeast of Minot here, from Velva, North Dakota, once described North Dakota as a blank spot on the nation's, a rectangular blank spot or something like that on the nation's imagination. It seems to me that's the thing we've got to fight. Yeah,
to me, there's something almost inspiring about it, though. We live on the northern Great Plains. Not everyone can do it. It's difficult. It's the winter. We're out here, trying to make a living. But there's a lot of special things about this state. And so, to go back to how do we build a reputation and a welcoming community for everybody, that begins with respect. It's I love this state. I want more people to come here. And so, focusing on how we build communities that are welcoming for everyone who wants to come, in my opinion, that's a good thing. We want folks to come here and live the American dream. That's what it's all about.
Well, Sean, you promised me a half hour of your time, and I think I've used every minute of it. So I appreciate you coming on, and good luck next year.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. It's been great talking with you, and I appreciate your time.